Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the study on Galatians. I'm hoping that some of you are really finding this enriching to your lives and are growing in your faith through this little study. I think there's a few of you watching. As a matter of fact, I have a challenge for those of you who are watching so I can kind of get to know you and see who's watching out there. First off, I would like to challenge you to read Galatians from front to back in one sitting. It should take about 10 minutes. It's not that big of a challenge, but then I would ask you just to point out what are some things that stood out to you that maybe you didn't notice before in your reading in the past. But we're going to jump right back into Galatians right now, and we're going to be talking today about whose authority ultimately matters. I think many of us already know the answer to that, but still, I think many of us are tempted to maybe mentally we're like, yeah, for sure, we know whose authority actually matters, but actually when it comes to real life scenarios, sometimes we don't always live that way. So let's jump into the text. And Paul picks up here and he says, "And they supported me and did not even demand that my companion Titus be circumcised, though he was Gentile." This is the whole point of why Paul in the first place is writing the book of Galatians, or writing the letter of Galatians, is because of this issue of circumcision. Even that question came up only because of some so-called believers, false ones really, who were secretly brought in. They sneaked in to spy on us and take away the freedom we have in Christ Jesus. They wanted to enslave us and force us to follow their Jewish regulations, but we refuse to give in to them for a single moment. We wanted to preserve the truth of the gospel message for you. And the leaders of the church had nothing to add to what I was preaching. By the way, their reputation as great leaders made no difference to me, for God has no favorites. Instead, they saw that God had given me the responsibility of preaching to the gospel to the Gentiles, just as he had given it to Peter the responsibility of preaching it to the Jews. For the same God who worked through Peter as the apostle of the Jews also worked through me as the apostle to the Gentiles. And that's where we're going to stop for today. So what's the big deal about this passage? First, we get to see what bad news had been leaking into the church at this point. It's this idea that people had to be circumcised in order to be Christians. And Paul was not about that, especially for Gentiles. And we're going to talk about that a lot more as we get further into Galatians, because Paul really hits this hard. But something I really want to hone in today on is the fact that is Paul's just view of people, of humanity, of leadership. Now, first off, we see that he says, by the way, their reputation as great leaders made no difference to me, for God has no favorites. That being said, he still went there to gain their wisdom, to gain counsel, and to gain more knowledge on what he was doing, so that he was sure that he was still preaching the good news himself. So he was going there to learn from them, but at the same time, he did not count them as something better than any other human being created in God's image. And this is very significant, because sometimes we can raise up our spiritual leaders in our churches and in people, even pastors like me, and say that, no, you're better than everybody else. You know God better. You have the authority, and I have to stop you right there, because I don't have any more authority than you do. Maybe I've studied the word a little bit more than you. Maybe I have a few thoughts that you can learn from. And those are good things to come to any person with and try to learn from them. But the second we start putting human beings in authority places that is above God, or that shows favoritism in the church, this is something that is bad news gospel. It's this place of humility, but also of recognizing that God alone is the one to be an authority in our lives. He is the number one authority that should always be in our lives. He should be the one that is growing us, changing us, and putting new ideas in our hearts and minds as we study his word and pray and talk to him. So it's unhealthy for us to put any kind of overemphasis of spiritual authority on any one person in our lives. Respect is key, and it's scriptural. But at the same time, God does not want us to show favoritism towards anyone. He doesn't want us to rely on anyone as our foundation other than Jesus alone. And so that's my devotional thought for you today. I hope this is helpful for you, and I hope to see you in the comments after you've read Galatians, and I'll see you for the next one.